The wind howled through the darkened streets, carrying with it the scent of an impending storm. The faint glow of streetlights barely illuminated the cracked pavement, casting eerie shadows that flickered like ghostly dancers. Amid this desolate scene, a small, scruffy tabby cat padded along, its fur streaked with the grime of alleyways, and its emerald eyes sharp and watchful. This was Spots, a cat well acquainted with the hardships of street life. As Spots rounded the corner of an abandoned lot, a faint, heart-wrenching sound pierced through the night. It was the unmistakable sob of a child. Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more updates. Curiosity piqued. Spots stopped and twitched her ears, pinpointing the source of the sound. It came from a figure huddled near a lamppost, barely discernible in the dim light. The figure was small, trembling, and utterly alone. Spots cautiously approached, her movements silent and deliberate. As she drew closer, the scent of tears and fear reached her sensitive nose, confirming what her keen eyes already saw. A young boy, no older than 6 or 7, sitting on the cold ground with his face buried in his hands. The boy's muffled sobs echoed in the silence, tugging at something deep within the feline's chest. Spots, though hardened by her life on the streets, felt an inexplicable pull toward this child. She meowed softly, her voice cutting through the boy's despair like a gentle whisper. Startled, he looked up, his tear-streaked face illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlight. His wide, frightened eyes locked onto Spots, and for a moment they simply stared at one another. "Kitty!" the boy whispered hoarsely, his voice cracking from crying. Spots approached cautiously, her tail held high in a gesture of friendliness. She rubbed her small, warm body against his leg, purring softly. The boy hesitated, then tentatively reached out a trembling hand to stroke her fur. Spots leaned into his touch, offering comfort in the only way she knew how. Through choked sobs, the boy began to speak. "I don't know where my mommy is. I got lost." His words came in gasps, each one laden with fear and helplessness. Spots didn't understand the intricacies of human language, but she recognized the raw emotion in his tone. She sat beside him, her presence a small yet steadfast anchor in his sea of despair. Minutes turned into an hour, and the storm that had threatened all evening finally broke. Rain began to fall in cold, relentless sheets, but the boy made no move to seek shelter. He hugged his knees to his chest, shivering as the downpour soaked his thin clothes. Spots, drenched but undeterred, nudged him insistently, her instincts telling her that they couldn't stay exposed in the open. She meowed loudly, pawing at his hand as if urging him to follow her. "Do you want me to go with you, Kitty?" the boy asked, his voice small and unsure. Spots responded with another loud meow, turning to trot a few steps forward before looking back at him expectantly. Slowly, the boy stood, his legs wobbly and weak from sitting on the cold ground. Spots led the way, her movements purposeful and her ears swiveling to pick up any sounds of danger. The cat guided him through the maze of streets, her paws finding paths she had walked countless times. Though she didn't know exactly where she was leading him, something inside her, something primal and unexplainable, told her she was doing the right thing. They passed darkened storefronts and abandoned buildings, the rain drumming against rooftops and pooling in the gutters. The boy followed without question, his small frame huddled against the relentless chill. Finally, they reached a narrow alley, where an old rusted door stood slightly ajar. Spots slipped through the gap, her lithe body disappearing into the darkness. The boy hesitated, fear flickering across his face, but Spots reappeared almost immediately, her green eyes glowing in the shadows as if to reassure him. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room beyond was dimly lit by the faint glow of a single bare light bulb. It was cluttered with discarded furniture, torn fabrics, and the unmistakable signs of a makeshift shelter. Spots led him to a corner where an old blanket lay in a heap. She pawed at it, indicating that he should sit. Grateful for even the smallest semblance of comfort, the boy wrapped the blanket around himself and sank to the floor. Spots curled up beside him, her wet fur pressed against his side. As the rain continued to pour outside, the boy began to relax, lulled by the rhythmic sound of Spots' purring. He whispered his name, Elliot. And though Spots didn't respond, he felt a strange sense of connection to the small creature who had rescued him from the streets. He told her about the park where he had last seen his mother, about the crowded paths that had swallowed him up, and about the hours he had wandered, searching and calling for her in vain. Morning came slowly, the gray light filtering through the cracks in the walls. Elliot stirred, his stomach growling with hunger. Spots was already awake, her ears perked and her eyes scanning the room. She rose and stretched, then darted toward the door. Elliot followed her, his trust in the little cat growing stronger with each passing moment. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world fresh and glistening. Spots led Elliot through the city once more, her movements as confident as if she had a map etched in her mind. They passed a bakery where the smell of fresh bread wafted through the air, causing Elliot's stomach to rumble louder. The boy hesitated, looking longingly at the display of warm pastries. Spots, as if sensing his need, darted into the shop through a small opening in the door. Moments later, she returned, clutching a roll in her mouth. Elliot gasped, both impressed and slightly horrified at the cat's boldness. But hunger won out, and he gratefully accepted the stolen breakfast. Their journey continued, Spots leading Elliot through winding streets and bustling crowds. It was as if the cat had some unerring sense of direction, a knowledge that defied explanation. Finally, they reached a large open park with sprawling green lawns and a playground teeming with children. Elliot's heart leapt in his chest. This was the park where he had last seen his mother. Spots guided him toward a bench where a woman sat, her face pale and etched with worry. She was clutching a photograph and speaking urgently to a police officer. As they approached, the woman looked up, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Elliot!" she cried, leaping to her feet. "Mommy!" Elliot shouted, running into her open arms. Tears streamed down both their faces as they clung to each other, the pain of their separation melting away in the warmth of their reunion. The officer looked on with a relieved smile, his radio crackling as he called off the search. Amid the joyful chaos, Spots sat a few feet away, her tail curled neatly around her paws. She watched the scene with quiet satisfaction, her mission complete. Elliot turned to her, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "You're my hero, kitty," he said softly. The woman knelt beside him, noticing the little tabby for the first time. "Is this your cat, Elliot?" she asked. "She found me," he replied. "She saved me." The woman reached out to pet Spots, who allowed it with a dignified air. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for bringing my boy back to me." From that day forward, Spots was no longer a stray. She became a cherished member of Elliot's family. Her days of scrounging and survival replaced with warmth, love, and plenty of food. But even as she settled into her new life, there was something about her that remained wild and untamed. A spark of the streetwise spirit that had guided her through the dark and brought a lost boy home. The days after Spots rescued Elliot were marked by a curious transition for both boy and cat. For Elliot, the overwhelming fear of being lost, abandoned, and alone began to fade. The comforts of home returned, the warmth of his mother's embrace, the soft chatter of the television in the evening, and the routine of hot meals that always ended with a kiss on the forehead. For Spots, the life of a stray, defined by cold nights and constant vigilance, was replaced with something foreign and almost magical: love. Spots adapted quickly to her new surroundings, exploring every inch of the modest apartment with a mix of suspicion and delight. She discovered the sunlit spots on the living room carpet where she could stretch out and nap, the soft cushions of the couch that felt like clouds under her paws, and the way Elliot's mother filled her bowl with food every morning and evening without fail. The clink of the spoon against her bowl became a sound she associated with security, a far cry from the scrabble for scraps she had once known. But Spots wasn't just any cat. There was something about her that stood out. Perhaps it was the sharp intelligence in her green eyes, or the way she seemed to always know when Elliot needed her most. At night, when the shadows in Elliot's room grew long and his dreams turned to the terror of being lost again, Spots would leap onto his bed, pressing her warm body against his side until his breathing calmed and the nightmares dissolved. It was as if she could sense his fears and knew exactly how to banish them. Elliot's mother, too, found herself drawn to Spots in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had never considered herself a cat person. Yet there was something about Spots' unflinching gaze and quiet companionship that felt comforting. When Elliot was at school, she often found herself talking to the cat, sharing her worries and thoughts as she went about her day. Spots would sit attentively, her tail curling and uncurling as if she were listening intently. Despite her new life of comfort, Spots retained the independence and resourcefulness that had defined her time on the streets. She would often sit by the window, her eyes following the movement of birds, cars, and people, with a longing that hinted at her wild past. On some evenings, when the pull of the outside world became too strong, Spots would slip out the door when it was left ajar, embarking on mysterious adventures that often lasted hours. Yet, she always returned, slipping back inside with an almost mischievous glint in her eye, as if to say, "I'll never forget who I am, but this is my home now." One crisp autumn morning, something peculiar happened. Elliot and his mother were walking Spots in the small park near their home. Though she wasn't leashed, Spots stayed close to Elliot, weaving through the grass and occasionally pouncing on falling leaves. As they walked along the path, a small group of children gathered on the playground, laughing and chasing each other. Elliot paused, watching them. He had always been a quiet child, shy and hesitant to approach others, but Spots, ever the curious observer, had other ideas. Without hesitation, the cat trotted over to the children, her tail held high. She wove between their legs, purring loudly and rubbing against them with an air of confidence. The children squealed with delight, crouching to pet her. One of them, a girl with curly hair and a bright pink jacket, turned to Elliot and waved. "Is this your cat?" she asked, her voice brimming with excitement. Elliot nodded, inching closer. "Her name is Spots," he said softly. "She's so friendly." Another child chimed in, scratching Spots under the chin. "Can she do tricks?" Elliot hesitated. Spots had never done tricks, but she had a knack for surprising him. "I don't know," he admitted. "Try," the curly-haired girl urged. Elliot knelt beside Spots and whispered, "Can you sit?" To his astonishment, Spots promptly sat, her tail wrapping neatly around her paws. The children clapped, and Elliot's cheeks flushed with pride. Encouraged, he asked, "Can you jump?" Spots leapt gracefully onto a nearby bench, earning more cheers. That day marked a turning point for Elliot. Through Spots, he found a connection to the world he had often struggled to engage with. The children began inviting him to join their games, and though it was daunting at first, Elliot discovered a newfound courage in their company. Spots became a regular fixture at the park, her presence a magnet for laughter and friendship. One day, however, something unusual happened. As Elliot, his mother, and Spots strolled through the park, a man sitting on a bench caught their attention. He was older, his face lined with wrinkles and his clothes worn and frayed. Beside him sat a battered backpack, and in his lap he held a photograph. His eyes, filled with sorrow, were fixed on the picture as though it were the only thing tethering him to the present. Spots, who had been chasing a squirrel, suddenly stopped. Her ears perked, and she turned her gaze toward the man. Without warning, she trotted over to him, her tail swishing with purpose. The man looked up, startled, as the little tabby leapt onto the bench beside him and began to nuzzle his arm. "I'm sorry," Elliot's mother called out, rushing over. "She's friendly, but can be a bit forward." The man shook his head, a faint smile breaking through his somber expression. "It's all right," he said, his voice gravelly. "She reminds me of a cat I used to have. Same markings, same boldness." He hesitated, then held out the photograph he had been clutching. It showed a young girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with a wide grin and bright eyes. "My granddaughter," he explained. "She used to bring me stray cats all the time. Said they needed a home. Spots here looks just like the last one she brought me before she passed." Elliot and his mother exchanged a glance, their hearts aching for the man's loss. Spots, as if sensing his pain, climbed into his lap and began to purr. The man chuckled softly, stroking her fur with trembling hands. For the next hour they sat with the man, listening to stories about his granddaughter and the cats she had rescued. When they finally parted ways, the man seemed lighter, as though Spots had lifted some of the weight from his heart. As the weeks turned into months, Spots continued to weave her magic. She became a small-town legend, the cat who brought people together. She seemed to have a sixth sense for those in need, whether it was the lonely elderly neighbor down the hall who missed her husband, the little boy at the park who was afraid of dogs until Spots befriended him, or even Elliot's mother, who sometimes struggled to balance work, parenting, and her own quiet grief over Elliot's father, who had left years before. Spot's influence wasn't confined to the emotional realm. She seemed to bring good fortune wherever she went. When Elliot's mother lost her wallet at the grocery store, it was found under a display of canned soup that Spots had pawed at insistently. When a neighbor's car broke down in the middle of a snowstorm, it was Spots who led them to a mechanic who happened to be walking by. And when Elliot's teacher at school announced a pet talent show, Spots stole the spotlight with her uncanny ability to perform tricks on command, earning Elliot his first trophy. Yet for all her adventures, Spots always returned to the quiet moments she shared with Elliot. On cold winter nights, as the wind howled outside and the stars glittered like frost in the sky, Spots would curl up beside him, her purring a lullaby that chased away the lingering shadows of fear. Elliot often wondered about the night Spots had found him, what had led her to him. Out of all the people and places in the city, he would never know the answer, but he liked to believe it was something extraordinary. Something beyond the ordinary bonds of logic or chance. As the years went by, Spots became a permanent fixture in Elliot's life, a guardian angel in feline form. And though life brought its share of challenges, heartbreaks, and joys, Elliot always carried with him the memory of that stormy night when a scruffy little tabby cat saved him and set the course of his life on an entirely new path. Spot's story became something of a family legend, a tale told and retold at gatherings, each time with more wonder and admiration for the cat who had changed their lives. And through it all, Spots remained, steadfast and wise, a living reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward in ways that are truly unbelievable. As the seasons turned, Spots grew into her role not just as a pet, but as an indispensable part of Elliot's life and the community around them. Her fame spread in the neighborhood, and soon she was more than just Elliot's cat. She was a beacon of hope, a strange little guardian who seemed to bring light to those who needed it most. Strangers would stop Elliot and his mother on their walks, asking about the wonder cat who had helped a grieving grandfather, befriended lonely children, or brought neighbors together with her uncanny intuition. They would smile and listen to the stories, marveling at how such a small creature had managed to leave such a big mark on their lives. Despite her growing legend, Spots never seemed to seek attention. She was content to remain by Elliot's side, her bond with him growing stronger with each passing day. They developed a silent understanding, a language spoken in glances, gestures, and the quiet moments they shared. Spots would often perch on the windowsill as Elliot did his homework, her tail flicking rhythmically as if to encourage him. At other times, she would leap onto his lap as he read, curling up as though she too was captivated by the stories. Elliot, now more confident and outgoing than he had ever been, began to thrive in ways his mother had once only dreamed of. His friendships deepened, his curiosity blossomed, and his fears of being left behind faded into distant memories. When asked about his change, he would always credit Spots, though he could never quite articulate why. "She just understands," he would say simply, and everyone who knew her believed him. One particularly memorable day came during the annual neighborhood fair. Spots, of course, accompanied Elliot and his mother, weaving through the crowds with her usual grace. As they reached the central square, where a local band was playing upbeat tunes, Spots did something unexpected. She jumped onto the stage, prompting gasps from the audience. Instead of bolting, she sat down calmly, her tail curled around her paws, and tilted her head as though she were surveying her subjects. The band, amused by her presence, began to play a lively tune, and the crowd erupted in laughter and applause. It was another moment where Spots seemed to bridge the gap between the ordinary and the extraordinary, bringing people together in joy. Years later, when Elliot looked back on his life, he would always return to these moments. The quiet nights, the laughter at the park, the unexpected adventures. Spots had been more than a cat. She had been a companion, a guide, and in many ways a savior. She taught him to see the beauty in small things, to trust in the magic of the world, and to believe that sometimes, even in the darkest moments, help can come from the most unexpected places. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the cat's actions? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.